Welcome back. I'm Natalie Nidham, your host. Think stem cells are just hype? Think again. Today you'll hear about how they're helping everything from brain injuries to skin rejuvenation in this episode with Dr. Joy Kong. She's a clinician and scientist who uses these therapies in her own practice and on herself. This episode is brought to you by Qualia Senolytic, Timeline Nutrition, and Ultimate GI Repair by Level Up Health, all with special offers just for you, the listener. Check out the show notes below for details. And now, enjoy the show. Dr. Joy Kong, it is such a pleasure to have you back.
Natalie, you're fabulous. I'm so happy to be back here.
Oh, well, you're just amazing. So we have a little mutual admiration club going on. It's all great. So this is your second time on the podcast, right? And
yes.
The first time, I know we talked about stem cells, but you know what? I think what's crazy about the stem cell space and the regenerative space in general is just how fast it's moving. There's so, like, every time you turn around, like somebody's using a new kind of stem cell, or they're activating it differently, or they're realizing that, oh no, for this application, this works better and that works better. And so even though we may have talked about stem cells last time, I want to talk about stem cells again this time, because it's probably been a year and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine even for you, like, things have moved since then. And I just, I feel like there's so many myths and so much confusion out there, and just hoping that we can unpack some of that stuff together.
That's great. Let's do it.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, like, what do you really focus on in your practice? Because here's the other thing, right? We have scientists and we have clinicians, and you bring those two worlds together in many ways, but really you're a clinician first, right?
Yeah. Well, science is what drew me to medicine, the secret of life, really. But the human interaction is what really, really cemented it and made me realize, definitely, I want to be in medical school. I want to be with patients. So stem cell therapy really allowed me to be a jack of all trades. So I specialized in psychiatry, right? I love the brain. Let's solve problems on the brain. And then I realized, well, it's a little one-sided how the field was developed and how doctors are practicing, because we're not looking at the body at all. We're just focusing on receptors and, just maybe one hormone, which is the thyroid hormone. It's really sad how it's disregarding the rest of the body. And now when I encounter the stem cells, not only I can help people with psychiatric disorders way more effectively, such as autism. It's still a question, is it a psychiatric disorder? Yes, there are psychiatric symptoms, but this is systemic inflammatory. We still don't know what it is, but it doesn't matter. That's the beauty of stem cell therapy, is sometimes I don't even need to know what it is, because there's a global mechanism of chronic illness, which is inflammation and immune dysregulation and tissue damage. So if we are involving any of those three areas, the stem cells can just jump in and target all those three sectors. And so all of a sudden I can help with so many people, so many conditions. So what do I focus in my clinic? It's like we don't have a focus, because we can help people with so many issues, starting from brain conditions, right? From autism to dementia to traumatic brain injury, ALS, Parkinson's, neuropathy, and we got heart disease, lung, liver, the reproductive organs. We got people with autoimmune conditions, all kinds of musculoskeletal issues. So really this whole wide range, all of a sudden I'm doing medicine, right? I'm not practicing a specialty, because I'm addressing the underlying causes of all of them.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. And so in your practice, when someone comes to you and let's say they have one of these big picture situations going on, right? So you don't exactly know everything that's happening, but do you get them to go through some kind of protocol or something before you introduce the stem cells into the body? Like, you hear about people talking about sometimes if there's too much inflammation in the body and there's too much noise going on, then the stem cells might not end up targeting what you think you need to target. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to go, because they're basically working on responding to messages.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because when, I hear a lot of providers say, oh, we've got to calm the inflammation down first, and then we'll do stem cell therapy. But the science research was actually showing when the inflammation level is high, the cells work extra hard and are producing extra benefits. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg, right? You want to calm the inflammation, but you also want to promote tissue repair. So if you promote tissue repair through stem cells, you calm the inflammation at the same time. And then, so where do you start? Do you start with tissue repair or inflammation? Inflammation can promote tissue repair because it promotes stem cell action.
Sure.
So, but one thing is true. If you have an acute injury, such as let's say some kind of tissue tear or heart attack or stroke, then you're creating a very toxic environment in that acute injury. And if you just put a bunch of cells there, the cells are not going to do very well because they can trigger the cells to die. So that, to me, is actually an opportunity for something more systemic. I think in those cases, if you administer cells through the IV route, it boosts your whole immune system's response to that injury. Now you can do something really beautiful without touching that local area. Later on, you can inject into the local area.
Really? So you have a tear in a shoulder, for example.
If it just happened within the first 48 hours, just injecting into that location may not, I believe, doesn't produce as good of a benefit as an IV infusion.
Interesting. That's so interesting. So the IV infusion is really going to have a global systemic effect.
Very much so, no matter what we're targeting. And of course, I'm speaking partially from my own experience when I broke my calcaneus by jumping off a very tall rock and landing on a tiny rock. And
Ow.
so instant breakage, it was extremely painful. And I injected cells right there, at the time. And, I don't know really how much difference it made. I did everything, red light, hyperbaric, and all kinds of herbs, ultrasound. I did everything possible. And I was only gaining a little bit of flexion every morning, maybe 1 degree improvement. But I got impatient. I was like, I'm going to put some IV stem cells in me. And then every morning is 2 to 3 degrees. It's very significant. I could tell, wow, I'm definitely accelerated. And that's what I've seen. IV stem cells accelerate healing 2 to 3 times as fast. That is obvious in cases where people are doing surgery. So you can give stem cells pre or post surgery. And I've seen it consistently in my patients that their recovery time is shortened by half or even to a third of what it will usually take.
If it's before the surgery or after the surgery,
right
or
before
either?
Or right after.
Really? But IV. Okay. Yeah. So IV stem cells. Now we're throwing around the word stem cells here, stem cells there. Some of the people in the audience might be going, okay, awesome. Where do I get me some of these stem cells? But then some other people in the audience are saying, well, what stem cells exactly are you talking about? Because we have autologous stem cells, so stem cells that come from our own body. So stem cells from our fat tissues, stem cells from our bone marrow, which, yes, it would be as unpleasant as you imagine getting those stem cells out. But then there's stem cells from another source. And there's a lot of noise in the world about it's like the stem cell wars, right? No, it's this one is better. No, these ones are better. And I've heard about V cells and Muse cells and umbilical cord cells, and I'm probably forgetting 7 different kinds. So do you want to take us on a little tour of all of these different stem cell populations? And are there some that you think really, really outshine? Or are there some that just shouldn't even be looked at? Tell us.
Yeah, I can give my experience. I've been in this field, not that long. It's been 9 years. Of course, there are a lot of predecessors, and the earliest stem cell therapy will be bone marrow transplant. And nobody knew they were doing stem cell treatments. But then we realized, oh my God, there are these progenitor cells in the bone marrow that can repopulate your system, your blood system. And they didn't think that we had blood cells or we had stem cells anywhere else. They thought that was it. And then they realized, oh my God, it's everywhere. Everywhere you have tissue, then you have stem cells. But then there's so many different kinds, right? So in the blood, there are these mononuclear cells, which are very primitive immune cells. There are hematopoietic progenitor cells that can form all the blood cells. And there are also a very, very tiny amount of MSCs. There may be some other cell types, including V cells we're talking about, that are dormant. So people don't talk about it very much because they're dormant, and your body naturally activate those cells when you have a calamity, like some catastrophic event, like a stroke, and those cells may come alive. So in bone marrow, yes, you have all these cells. However, then they realize that everywhere when you have blood vessels, you have these cells called mesenchymal stem cells. So that has been the buzzword. Dr. Arnold Kaplan discovered them, and he was vehement about renaming them medicinal signaling cells. He hated the fact that people are calling it stem cells, even though they are stem cells. I've had arguments with scientists who said they're not stem cells. Well, by all definition, they are stem cells, and they have been shown to differentiate into different tissue, not just in the musculoskeletal system, but tissue of liver, of neurons. So we've seen these cells, they have the capability to differentiate. However, what we use them for is for their ability to produce signals to trigger your body to repair. So that became really famous because these cells are very versatile. They're very easy to grow. So you can multiply them to huge numbers, and they're immune evasive. So they're very immune calming. So you can take it from one person, give it to another, and you're not generating immune rejection, for the most part. So especially if you're using very young sources, then the chance of rejection is extremely low. So that became very popular.
Are you enjoying this episode? Amazing. I put together a gift for you. If you go to natniddam.com/free, you will get my 3 free habits for longevity and health span that you can practice every single day for the next 30 days. Now, it's not 3 habits every day. It's 3 habits you will execute for 30 days. So just one-shot deal. So that's natniddam.com/free. Now let's get back to that episode.
When I first came on the scene, I was using umbilical cord blood cells. And just so you know, the cord blood, the composition is almost the same as the bone marrow. Very, very similar. So it's a one system, right? The blood flows through your bone marrow. So it's one system. So the cord blood is very similar to the bone marrow, which means it's rich in those mononuclear cells, hematopoietic progenitor cells. There's some fibroblasts and epithelial progenitor cells, but there are very, very few MSCs. So, but we're still seeing great results. So that means all those other cells are pretty important too. Great results, even in orthopedic conditions, right? People think, oh, you definitely need mesenchymal stem cells to produce these orthopedic repairs. Apparently, cord blood cells can do that too. So people get locked into one field and forgot to respect that all these cells can produce incredible benefits. And mesenchymal stem cells, of course, is everywhere in your body, along your blood vessels. The reason they're trying to take cells out of the fat is nothing to do with fat. It has everything to do with the fact that the fat tissue is very easily obtained, that you can actually take it away, right? People are not too worried about you taking their fat away.
Nobody worries about losing their fat.
But they don't care about the fat. No one cared. They're trying to go after the blood vessels that's nourishing your fat, right? We just can't get other tissue without damaging you. And fat, nobody cares about. So now we can get fat and then spin the solution down, after the liposuction. Now you've got all these cells that are, there's a large percentage of mesenchymal stem cells. So that's what they're after. And then they can purify them and put it back in the body. However, when you use your own mesenchymal stem cells, it's nowhere as potent as when you use very young umbilical cord derived stem cells. There's no way around it, because umbilical cord stem cells from mostly the cord tissue, maybe a little bit of an amniotic membrane, these mesenchymal stem cells have retained the earlier characteristics from the embryonic stem cells, right? Very, very early, potent stem cell that can become anything. So they don't do that anymore. They're not as wild as the embryonic stem cell, which I don't know if you've heard people growing tumor on their back. I don't know why that's a popular place to grow tumor, but people who have gotten embryonic stem cell treatment, that's a common
Are those called teratomas?
Yeah,
It's a teratoma.
teratoma,
Yeah.
right. Uncontrolled growth of all kinds of tissue in one clump. And then um, these umbilical cord cells, but even though they don't have that wild potential to cause teratoma, there's no risk of teratoma from umbilical cord stem cells. Why? Because these cord have developed so far along that as a time is the same age as the baby. The baby, even though you think the baby's very young, but the baby is considered an adult in embryological terms. So this is fully formed adult tissue. So the the umbilical cord stem cells, it's so far down the road, but then it's because it's caught in the middle of forming this embryo, it retained a lot of characteristics. So it lost the wild potential, but retained a lot of the potent wide capabilities to differentiate. So that's kind of the best of both worlds. And so far that's been gaining ground. When I first came into the field, when I started comparing the tissue sources, I think I may have generated some controversy. You know, displeased certain people who are in certain camps because they are, very vested in the treatment that they were doing. But I didn't care because all I cared was the patient. If I'm going to do this, I better produce the most results, right? That's my guiding that's a principle. So I wanted to compare these different tissue sources. And what I realized is the birth tissue is not only more effective, but they're also safer because they don't have the tendency to promote cancer growth. Whereas if you use your own stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, they have lost a lot of that potential to recognize cancer and they tell everything to grow. So to me, it's only ethical for me to give people something that's more effective and with less potential side effects. And then I knew at that time, after I analyzed all these available treatments, that umbilical cord stem cells is going to start to take over as far as the proportion of stem cell therapy. And that's exactly what happened. The piece of the pie, it was only a small sliver that was umbilical cord stem cells. I think it was like 20% when I first entered, and then just became bigger and bigger. I think it's approaching 50% now.
Wow.
So it's just going to get bigger. But like you said, the field is rapidly advancing. There are all kinds of newcomers, which is very interesting. And I've tried. So you mentioned V cell. So I've tried it. Muse cell, I'm actually looking at incorporating that shortly. I'm willing to give it a try, although the evidence has not been as robust as the mesenchymal stem cells, of course, because mesenchymal stem cells. Yeah, Muse cells, right. So these all sound great. V cell sounds amazing. I've gone through the training, but there's not as robust of studies from around the world, and there's no comparison. You may have isolated papers, but the mesenchymal stem cell papers are in the thousands. Right? They're everywhere. So it's very robust. And clinically, I've seen incredible benefits. Of course, what I use clinically is a combination of cell types from the cord blood, which I mentioned are very powerful, and also all the MSCs from the cord tissue and amniotic membrane. So when I combine them, then you're amplifying these cells. We know different cell types work together. We know that, is evidenced by research. So by putting them together now, you're creating this healing element from the early birth tissue, the type of healing that was available from the early stage. Now we put in the older person's body. Now you're really amplifying, right? All the healing elements. You don't just focus on one element.
Right. You mentioned Muse cells. So seeing as you feel that MSCs are the best, like you've seen results in all these different areas, which I'd love to dig into some of the different areas in a minute. Why would you even look at something else? And where do Muse cells come from?
I look at everything else because I don't want to be behind, and I want to give people the best. Yeah, okay. I'm intellectually very curious and very open. I'm never going to be called, like a one trick pony.
Closed-minded person.
That's just not who I am. And I'm excited about new things, and I want to see, do they work? I'm willing to give it a try. I've yet to see more research studies. There's some, but it's not enough. But the promise and the excitement is tremendous. So I'm willing to give it a try. Of course.
So where do they come from? Like, where do Muse cells come
They
from?
actually are part of the MSC population. So it's a subpopulation of the mesenchymal stem cells. A lot
So
of
they've been
time,
isolated out from,
yeah,
and
yeah,
also
they
from
have
cord blood.
particular markers on the
Hmm.
surface, so you can differentiate who they are. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
only a fraction of the MSCs, 1 to 3% of the MSCs are these Muse cells. So they didn't know. So people thought MSCs are so powerful, and now the thought is, okay, all those differentiation, all these new tissue cells that you're seeing, like I mentioned, neuron and liver cells, it could be coming from these Muse cells. Muse cells is
Um,
pretty cool. I love how they work because they see something bad and damaged, they will destroy it and eat it up. When after it eats it up, it has these DNA fragments from the cells, and these DNA fragments is actually going to trigger these Muse cells to become them. So it's like you eat your enemy, and then you become a better version of your, like
oh my God, it sounds like a sci-fi show.
I know. So that is super cool. That's
Yeah,
is really exciting. I mean, you get to see nature's mechanism of regeneration is like, okay.
that's amazing. And so these things exist in our bodies, but yet the populations decline dramatically as we age. Is that, because theoretically what you're
Very much
describing
so.
is these are
Drastically decline.
mechanisms, yeah, these are physiological mechanisms of regeneration that in theory, if we could stop them from declining or degrading as we age, we should be like, what's his name? We should be Deadpool. We should just repair on the go. Right? Because
Yeah,
technically those stem
there's
cells are there and they should be able to initiate regeneration as things degrade and break down, and yet they don't.
well, as we age, we're losing these signals. We're losing these cells. So, I mean, we all remember how we were. Do you remember when you were a baby or when you
Not
were a
really.
few years old, right? If you cut yourself, who cares? You're going to heal right
Mm-hmm.
back. But when you are in your 40s and you cut yourself and it takes forever to heal. So your body just doesn't have quite the signal to do something really effectively and rapidly. So that's what's lacking, because by the time you're a teenager, the number of stem cells, the MSCs in particular, uh, as far as proportion to all the cells in your body, has dropped to 1/10 of what you had when you were born. And then when you
Mm-hmm.
reach your 40s, you become 1/4 of what you had when you were a teenager. And then when
Wow.
you're in your 80s, becomes 1/5 of what you had in your 40s. So you can imagine it's just like rapidly, right? It's going downhill fast. And how can we stop that train? Someone gave an analogy, was always thought it was fun. It's like aging is like a roll of toilet paper. The more you go, the faster it goes.
Faster it
And
goes.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
really that's really what's happening. But
Yeah.
now we can intercept. We can put these young cells in the body. All of a sudden, all the signals that you've lost are fresh and clear again. Now your body can hear what it needs to do. That's why research have shown that there are all these rejuvenation, these reverting cells to a younger state. So it's not
Mhm.
just in theory. All the animals, when we do animal study, live longer. They seem to be doing well. They're move better. They look better. Their mental capabilities better. And then when we actually dissect their cells, the cells literally are functioning at a younger state. Everything
Wow.
gets back to the younger level. So that's because we give them the right signals.
Yeah. And so for the Muse cells, are there particular use case scenarios you think that people believe that these Muse cells are addressing? Like, are they better for organ regeneration, or maybe do they have a better affinity for the
There's some
brain?
research, there's not a lot, but there are some
Yeah.
promising results, like in after stroke, repair after stroke,
So the brain.
ALS. Yeah, there's some cases for organ regeneration, but I think because it's so new, there's just not enough research. Everyone wants research statistics. Well, it's easy said than done, right?
Hmm.
Somebody has to have the money to actually go ahead and do it and design the study. So it's not as easy. Oh, show me the research. But so now we're relying a lot of anecdotal evidence.
Right.
So apparently people say
Yeah.
amazing things. I have yet to see it in my clinic. I'm willing to do it. I want to
Yeah.
do it
Yeah.
myself, of course. First, I want to see
Yeah.
if
Except you're not broken. So
we're all broken one
no, you're
degree
not
or
broken.
another.
No, 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 no.
We're all, I'm definitely a little broken.
No. Okay. All right. So yeah, but I think that once you've established that a cell population is not going to trigger the growth of teratomas or abnormal tissue, then I guess it is possible clinically to start applying them to see how they work in different patient populations. So in a way, it's kind of going around the whole big clinical trials that cost bajillions of dollars, that take years and years and years to do, and that really kind of slow the process down. But it moves you into a place where you can, out of curiosity, offer to your patients different different options, saying, I know this is going to work in this way. There's some evidence that this, for a stroke. So for a stroke, this might work better. Like the Muse cell might be, and it's a little bit what you said earlier. Like it's not that the Muse cell is a new cell. Is it possible it's that subpopulation of the total MSC population that's targeting the brain? So if we could bring more of those on board when we know there's brain or nervous system work to be done, that then we're just giving it a bigger hit. So let's say you're introducing Muse cells. Let's say, for example, somebody comes in and they've either had a TBI or a stroke or some kind of brain event. Is the way to introduce the Muse cells as an IV, or is there a way to target the brain specifically? Because there's always that question, are the cells actually going to go where you want them to go?
That's the same question. Any cells that we're using, how do you target the brain? No matter what cells you're using, maybe V cells are very small, but most of other cell types are really, really large. So you would need to do something to open up the blood-brain barrier. But I think even V cells is still, I have to look up to see if they're able to cross the blood-brain barrier. Exosomes have no problem. That's why when we treat people with brain conditions, we often add exosomes because they're nanoparticles, so they can go right across. But any type of cells, we may want to open up the blood-brain barrier. And one typical way of doing it is mannitol infusion. So we give that prior to stem cells if we're trying to target the brain. The blood-brain barrier will be open for about 40 minutes after the mannitol infusion. So they shrink the gap junction cells, and then all of a sudden the gap junction is opening up. Or we can do different injections that are not as invasive. I know very rare doctors will inject into the spinal canal. There's more risk involved, and I'm not convinced that's really necessary. So, I mean, someone could do that. But what I would do is intranasal. We can do intranasal injections, because when you put the cells into the nasal membrane, they're actually uptaken by the olfactory nerve right into the brain. But there's also trigeminal nerve, and they all can take the cells into the brain. But that's also a painful, uncomfortable procedure, because everything I give to my patients, I tried on my own. So I definitely did that. I was tearing up for about 5 minutes. I was like, oh my goodness. And of course you recover, but it's not a pleasant experience. That's why I don't like doing it. If a patient really, really wants it, I can do it, but I would rather do exosomes. And what we also do in the clinic is to use laser light. So actually, V-cell therapy, V-cell, that's their claim to fame, is to use laser light to attract the cells into particular regions. So laser, of course, particular wavelengths are incredibly powerful and therapeutic at improving mitochondrial function, but also they help the cells to be more active, more viable, and they can attract the cells. Let's say I'm shining the laser onto the brain. I'm focusing on the brain, and the cells I'm giving IV are passing through the brain. Right, especially you open up the blood-brain barrier. So they're passing through. But how do you know the cell's going to stay there? But if you put a laser on there, they actually activate adhesion molecules. So all of a sudden, it's like a little foot that gets a little sticky. Boom. Then they get stuck on the blood vessels, right? Now they have a chance to actually migrate out into the brain tissue, and now they can work right there. So there are different ways of accessing.
Wow. What about giving someone a vasodilator? Would that help?
Supplements, I include in our treatment. aiming at, one is the vasodilation, is the nitric oxide. Other things are things that help with cell signaling, like
Mm-hmm.
fulvic acid is good for, right? You replenish the body with all these minerals. Now you have better
Mm-hmm.
signaling of the cells. And then, there are other things, amino acids, but that's more long-term tissue building. And, um, and I also add stem regen,
You
that
do, huh?
helps with, that helps, getting more cells into the circulation. Um, so stem regen is fantastic, but if you're only using that, then you're just recirculating your own stem cells,
Yeah.
which is still can be very
And
powerful, but
I think it's really good for recovery. It's the poor person's way of getting at least making the most of their own stem cells,
right,
right?
right. Yeah. But really to get the superpower, I think there's nothing that can compare with much earlier cell sources. Yeah.
For
It
sure.
just, they're just better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, they're fresh. They're fresh off the line, kind of thing. So, is there any risk to taking cord blood stem cells and maybe getting some DNA that you don't want? Like, talk to us a little bit about that conversation, because I don't think I'm not sure that with stem cells it's as big a deal, but with exosomes, I've heard that there might be an issue around getting non-native DNA into your system. Is that, do
First
you
of
want to?
all, I am not the least concerned about the DNA. So,
Not even a little bit. Okay.
one reason is because we as human beings, you think that you're so pure that you're just Natalie. No, you're not just Natalie. You're a multitude. Have you had children? If you
Mhm.
had children, you're going to have your children's DNA floating around in your body. However, research have found that 60% of women have Y chromosomes in their body, and that cannot be accounted for just by having male kids or having had a male sibling that you didn't know about in utero and they died. And so you can't account for that. The only way you can account for 60% of Y chromosomes, right? Y chromosomes have no business in a woman's body unless they
No,
came from a male. So the only reason they can get the Y chromosomes will be from sexual intercourse. So something as benign, people don't think about it as sex. Well, you just had DNA exchange. So it's part of human existence. So I don't want people to be so hung up on, oh my
hmm,
God, I got somebody else's DNA. You already have it. So just know that.
just deal with it. Well, and trust the process, because there's a fairly extensive screening process of donors of cord blood, right? Like, I mean, people don't just go out and randomly pick people up off the street
Oh,
who are
it's a
pregnant.
very extensive process. And that's part of the reason why the therapy is expensive, because each time, first of all, the popularity of umbilical cord derived stem cells have gone up so much that the tissue, because it's the people cannot be compensated when they donate, is a pure donation. So you can't entice somebody
Like
saying, if
legally.
I pay you money, can you please donate? No, you can't do that, because the
Yeah.
sale of human tissue is illegal in the US.
Yeah. Well, that
So
makes sense.
then you get
Yeah.
rid of the incentive for people to lie and, just to be able to get something from
Right.
donating. So no, you cannot get money. But there are procurement companies. There are companies that go out there to get the tissue for the labs that are processing the tissue, right? So these companies, the price of these tissue has gone up because they're like, well,
It has.
I guess it's business. So the price has gone up and up because they're in high demand.
It's
So
interesting because you almost would have thought the price would have come down over time, but instead it's
yeah,
going up right now
unfortunately,
because of a supply and demand.
exactly. So, but the procurement company provide a essential service because they're doing a lot of the screening. So the
Hmm.
mothers, just because you want to donate doesn't mean you get to donate, because you have to fill out a very extensive questionnaire. First of all, they're actually going to be asked if you want to save the cord for yourself or for your baby. And if they
Hmm.
say no, which is 90% of them, then they're asked if they want to donate. And then they will be asked to fill out a very extensive questionnaire, asking about everything from their own personal history, their own medical history, their family history, their travel experience, or travel exposure, toxic exposure, work history, their prenatal history, sexual history, and their partner's history. So everything is taken into account. Of course, we only obtain tissue from the U.S. source. So these women have gone through all these regular prenatal care. So they're screened for all kinds of conditions. So they are, in a sense, at least our laboratory only obtain pristine tissues from women with pristine answers, right?
It's
There's no
amazing
reason
that
for them to lie.
yeah.
And also another thing I want to stress, not everyone cares about this, but I care about this a great deal. We do not accept mothers who have been vaccinated by the COVID vaccine. That is something I'm not willing to budge. One day, the truth will come out and we'll see the extent of potential damages and problems. And it's just not a risk I'm willing to take for my patients or myself. So, so these are some of the parameters. And of course, then when they are sent to the lab to process, the lab, not only they're screened for all the infectious diseases that any tissue or organ transplantation is required to screen for, like hepatitis, syphilis, HIV, and CMV, and blah, blah, blah. And so they have to screen for everything that you have to screen for if you want to donate a heart, a liver, lung. And so they will process the tissue after the screening is actually qualified. And then after they processed the product, so you finally separate out the cells and then you're freezing the cells. Now you've got a ready to go product, right? It's in a freezer. Anytime a doctor needs it, it can be sent to a doctor right before you use it. You thaw it out and then the cells come alive. However, before you can give it to anybody, that has to go through a sterility testing. And that takes 2 weeks for a third-party lab to be able to detect whether or not any bacteria is going to grow. Is there any contamination you've introduced during your processing? And only after that is cleared, then it can be sent out to doctors to use.
Wow, that's crazy. It's amazing you get any, because the stat I've heard is that, over 90% of the population is carrying EBV, some form of Epstein-Barr virus, or, there's just there's so much of that around in the population. It's amazing that you can even get any pristine samples anymore. And you mentioned the vaccine, but what about people who've had COVID? Is the belief that if you've just had COVID and if you didn't have the vaccine, that the body would have cleared the spike protein, or are they actually looking for spike protein in the material as well?
I'm not really sure. Yeah, I would not exclude people who happen to have COVID. I've had COVID and it's okay. You've got over it, right? Your immune system is strong enough to get rid of it. But if you have long COVID syndrome, sorry, your immune system somehow is not able to handle this viral load and has not been able to clear all of either the virus or the toxic byproducts from it. So I would definitely stay away from those people, but those would be considered a sick population, right? They wouldn't even qualify.
No, for sure. Okay, let's get back to our MSCs. So let's talk about some of the different applications. So some of the things that people think about when it comes to stem cells, they think about healing joints and soft tissue injuries. And I'm pointing at my shoulder because my shoulders hurt these days. So whether it's shoulders or knees or hips, but it's not uncommon for men, middle-aged men, to snap their Achilles tendon, for example, which is a catastrophic injury, right? That is a big fat problem. Your calf ends up around your kneecap. You're in a worst case scenario. Do you feel that stem cells are helpful in those applications? I would imagine they have to be.
Yeah. So you mentioned some orthopedic issues, and that's something we have to realize, that physics are involved, right? We have tissue, but if there's complete tear, then the cells would not be able to, grab two ends and put it together, right? That's something that you need. However, if you attach them, and now, or if it's partial tear, then you've got a chance, because there are areas that are still joined. Then there's a chance for the cells to slowly close that gap, and by extending themselves, right? So, but if it's complete tear, then surgery is important, but stem cells can help a person recover from surgery much faster, and probably the results will be much more complete healing.
Yeah, well, because I was going to say, because the surgery is only going to do so much. Then you need, if you want a better functioning system, I would imagine the stem cells are going to give you a better healing process than just expecting the natural scarring system of the body. Like you might end up with adhesions or scar tissue that doesn't behave exactly the same way as the original ligament or tendon
Sometimes
might have
our own
originally.
healing mechanism is just not adequate enough. That's why we've got people with scars that, that look pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember this patient who had a gum surgery, and she said, I want stem cells after my gum surgery. So she literally staggered into my office, still with some anesthesia in her. And then I injected stem cells right around the areas that she got surgery. And she healed up so beautifully. You cannot see that she ever had surgery done.
Wow.
I was very jealous. I was like,
Yeah.
well, because I have it done once before, and I've got a big old scar. So
Yeah.
I didn't have
That's
stem cells at
amazing.
the time. So
Yeah, well, you can only do what you know. Okay, let's talk about IV stem cells next. So we already talked about the brain. I'm trying to think of different use case scenarios, right? Like what's really hot right now? So everybody seems to have a thyroid problem. For immune function, when we talk about is it helping the immune system by targeting the thymus gland, or is it helping the immune system just by generally speaking targeting different populations of immune cells? Like when we're talking about systemic applications of stem cells, are you able to, and would it be the MSCs at that point? Like it sounds like the Muse cells, you're leaning more towards the brain and neurological stuff, whereas the MSCs seem to be like kind of your, for now anyway,
well,
your work.
since Muse cells are a subpopulation of the
Yeah.
MSCs, they're really kind of together, and they work together. There's like
Yeah.
they team up together. Um, I don't know if there's evidence of exactly which organ was rejuvenated. As far as thymus, I don't know. There's much evidence. I haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it doesn't exist,
Yeah.
but that has not, that not been on my radar. But we do know that stem cells rejuvenate the immune system, and not to mention the fact that it can make your bone marrow, right? It literally repopulates your entire immune system. So yes, it can give you new, fresh new immune cells, but it can also talk to your spleen and your peripheral lymphoid system and really bring them on board to mount this more massive immunological kind of attack on whatever problem that's going on in the system, and it calm inflammation significantly. And for autoimmune conditions, that's a typical example. Your immune system out of whack, and one of the places where MSC therapy shines is in autoimmune conditions.
Really?
Yes. And it's really
Wow.
beautiful. I've treated people with lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, psoriasis, and a lot of other modern chronic illnesses have autoimmune origin, chemical sensitivity. All these just beautiful results. So calm the immune system. So that's why I think it's important, even when a person is trying to help a local issue, you want to bring your whole body on board. If you think
And
your
do the
knee is
IV.
just floating around in space as a knee, it's not true. It's part of your body, just like your brain is part of your body. So you want to attack from different angles. For larger joints, I may want to put the cells right into the joint, because the communication between the blood and the joint space, the inside the capsule, is very, very slow, extremely slow. So I may want to just put some extra healing juice right into the knee joint itself, especially for people who are older, and this knee problem is chronic. It's not a wear and tear. It's not an acute injury. It's there because your body just can't repair it. It's stagnant. So
Yeah.
now you want to elevate your body's ability to regenerate your full
Right.
body. And then your
Yeah.
immune system can come on board and help you heal that local tissue.
Do you recommend that people, if they can, if they have the means and the access, would you recommend that regular stem cell IVs would
I
be
would.
part of an healthy anti-aging or healthy aging
Absolutely.
plan?
Yeah,
And how often would
absolutely.
people
I
do that?
think a recommendation is once every 3 to 6 months. So
Wow.
I do it every 3 months, and that has
Hmm.
been now about 9 years. And I have patients who do, yeah, you can do it every 6 months or even a year. That's better than nothing.
Yeah.
I have patients who do it every 2 months. So it depends on how motivated you are, how much resource you have. And I don't think it's too much to do it even once a month. I don't think it is excessive. However, looking at how the cells work, probably every 3 months is fantastic. Every six
Yeah.
months is good too. The reason I say every 3 to 6 months is because the cells live in your body for about 1 to 3 months.
Okay.
And healing elements that they secrete, specifically exosomes, are going to be producing their effect for another 3 months. That's usually when you give exosome, that's how long the benefit lasts, is about 3 months. We're talking on average. But so if you always want some cells in your body, maybe every 3 months, if you always want these signals in your body every 6 months, that's kind of the rationale.
When it comes to aesthetics, because there's a whole other area of using stem cells in the aesthetic field, like for, we have vampire facials or microneedling with stem cells. How much can that really do?
A lot. One of my patients has severe skin damage, tremendous sun damage. I mean, I can show you the photos. Just a lot of lesions, precancerous changes, and his nose is red, and just a lot of kind of scaling, and just yeah, it
Damage.
looks really, really unfortunate. And what I did was that I injected stem cells right around the areas of the lesions into the healthy tissue, because what you want to do is to wake up the healthy tissue so they can start to regenerate and replenish themselves to eventually push out the tissue that are dysfunctional. So what I injected strategically around the lesions, and I did microneedling. Very
Hmm.
simple procedure. The results were fantastic. It was amazing, transformative with one session. So I definitely have seen in my
Wow.
own, yeah, my own eyes. And if a person doesn't like injections, so injecting in the face, I don't know if you've ever done
I've
injecting in
done
the
it.
face. It's kind of painful, right?
It's
So,
I'll call it unpleasant. I mean, you
so
can only get so much freezing from the topical stuff.
I
So,
know. Yeah. When you inject the volume, it pushes against the tissue. So even if you have topical, it doesn't quite,
well,
cut
some
all the
areas are
way
not as
through.
bad as others. Like some, but there's definitely some areas that you're just like, wow.
Yeah. But I feel with exosomes, we may be able to get very similar results. So the way we're doing, because exosomes are so small, right? I don't have to inject it. It would just go right through your skin. So I can
Okay.
just put it topically and do microneedling. It doesn't even have to be deep. And microneedling triggers this regenerative process. It
Yeah,
sends a
micro
signal.
damage. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like it awakens your body. I give you a funny story. This is from a doctor that I worked with. She had a dog that had an autoimmune condition and lost
Hmm.
all his hair, right? This is a bald dog.
Poor dog.
And so she took the dog for a walk and along the ocean and on the ledge. And the dog fell, scraped a whole side of the body. And guess what? That whole side where it scraped, the hair grew back, right?
Come
Everywhere
on.
else is still bald. So this just shows you if you agitate the area, you create a little bit disturbance that wake your body up. So
Huh.
that's one reason I think microneedling, you don't want to, just forego that process. It's still
Hmm.
very, very
So it's that
important.
micro injury that really makes it happen. And so, how
Exactly.
deep? Because I have a micro needling pen at home, and I look at it, and it looks at me, and I look at it, and it looks at me, and I'm like,
It
because I
doesn't
know
have
that
to
when
go
I
deep. It's like a little,
like even at the
yeah,
point five,
0.25, even 0.25.
really, because that would just be
Mhm.
like a little bit of sandpaper on the skin. It wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, but it can still. Well, I'm talking about I'm talking about using exosomes.
Yeah.
I would
No.
still go a little deeper to the point I can tolerate because I like feeling something. I don't
Hmm.
want to just feel like it's doing nothing. Especially, I think if a person has any deeper scars,
Yeah.
like acne scars, then you may want to go a little deeper so you can disrupt that
Hmm.
matrix that was set. Right. So stem cells, even exosomes, will have anti-fibrotic properties. So they will
Right.
help you break down scar tissue, but you're going to help it by agitating that area.
Yeah, well, that kind of makes sense. And so, what about for like sun damage? How deep do you have to go to hit the sun? Because it's going to be in different layers of the skin, right? Different issues are going to happen in different layers of the skin. So, typically, how deeply do you have to go to disrupt
I don't
the
think you
melanin?
need, I don't think you need to go very deep.
It's
Yeah.
not very deep.
Yeah. The exosomes is going to permeate, is going to,
Okay,
yeah.
me and my little microneedling pen might have a date. I don't know.
I know. I'm the same way. I have the pen, but gosh, I almost never do it. I just don't
I
have the
need somebody else
time.
to do it for me.
I know. It's just, there's so many things that we know are good for us, but we're not doing it. So, but if you're motivated, set up a time. Yeah, just microneedling stuff. And I actually used a cream I created, Char Omni. I think
Hmm.
you've tried the cream, right?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I ran out. I was like, oh.
That's okay. I'll send you a bottle. Yeah.
Okay.
So Char Omni has stem cells and peptides in it, and it's so gentle. You can put it on your skin and then start doing microneedling over it,
Wow. Really?
and amplifies the microneedling results.
When we talk about stem cell therapy, we talk about they have to be frozen to minus 80 degrees, which is that magic number where everything, it's like it suspends life, right? And then you
Hmm.
ship them frozen. And then in the lab, right before you're going to apply them, or in the room or whatever it is, you let them thaw and then you apply them so that they stay vital. Are exosomes the same? Can exosomes live? Because I'm starting to see exosomes in a million different products out on the market. So
Right.
millions may be an exaggeration, but we're starting to see the word exosome pop up a lot more. Do exosomes also
Well,
have to be
exome is
frozen?
still a biologics, right? Lipid bilayer. So it's a biological entity that can be degraded.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't treat it carefully, correctly, then they're just not going to be effective. So we do have cryopreserved exosomes, which have high potency, but we also have lyophilized, which is really freeze dried exosome, but you have to process it correctly. Then when you reconstitute, they're still the same exosomes, right? It's like
Wow.
peptides. You can
Yeah, yeah.
denature peptides, but
Mm-hmm.
if you process it correctly, then when you reconstitute, that's exactly what you put in there.
Correct.
Nothing was changed.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the copper peptide? Have you worked with
I
it at
love
all, or
copper
is that
peptide.
you do?
Yeah. So in my
That's why
cream,
you're
I have
wearing
I
blue.
have copper peptide, and in one of our products, so we have this thing called Glow Kit that we can reconstitute exosomes with. It has a hyaluronic acid, copper peptide, and biotin. So by reconstituting the exosomes with this fluid, then you get this extra kick for skin and hair rejuvenation. So we use that for our procedures for skin and
Wow.
hair.
That's amazing. So yeah, so here's the other area that is really, really interesting with the stem cells and exosomes again. And I think particularly like maybe not so much with male pattern baldness, but with women as we start to kind of get a little bit of hair loss at the temples, is that in your opinion, do exosomes, stem cells, these types of treatments, are they helpful? Or is
Mm-hmm.
that more kind of like the androgenic stuff where once the follicles
It is very
called it?
helpful. Yeah. Even my cream, apparently, I've seen incredible results with no
Really?
microneedling, just by my cream has produced some pretty incredible results. So that has stem cells and exosomes in it. The cells are not alive. However, the cells, they do contain all these cytokines and exosomes, that those can be maintained, right? Even though
Mm-hmm.
the cell themselves are, membrane has broken. But yeah, um, I've definitely, we do hair procedure at our clinic. We can we can inject stem cells. Again, injecting into the scalp can be quite painful, but it can be done.
Well, there's not a whole lot of tissue there, right? So whenever it's like the forehead, there's not.
Right, exactly. But we can easily use exosome. That can produce incredible results. So that was what we do, because we can use the exosomes with the combination I was talking about, hyaluronic
Mhm.
acid, GHK copper, and biotin, and then put it over the scalp and then do microneedling. That itself is incredible.
Wow. That's remarkable. So, how far do you think this is going to go? Like, do you think people can get to the point it'll ever get to the point where people don't need a facelift, for example, if they with different types of stem cell and exosome treatments, whether it's injections or microneedling, or do you think that whole face falling business is just going to happen no matter what, and this could maybe slow things down a little bit?
Okay, I'm really hoping to be a guinea pig for everybody. And it's funny. So I'm 53 years old, and
Mhm.
and I've been accused. We're talking about how mean people can be on social
Oh yeah,
media.
yeah.
I've had people accusing me of being dishonest, saying that Dr. Kong should just be honest about this. She obviously had a facelift and she should just, tell everybody. That's why I grabbed like plastic surgeons that look, show me, do you see anything, any evidence of anything being done? Obviously not. It was like, what can I tell you? I mean, this is,
Mhm.
this is natural in the way that I'm tapping into the natural healing properties of stem cells, because I'm not, I would say I'm not the most consistent, or I'm not the most patient person. So sometimes I get annoyed. I don't like taking all these supplements. I'm just not the only thing I'm consistent with is my stem cell infusion every 3 months, because it's so easy, right? I was
Wow.
like, okay, 3 months, I'm going to do that.
Do an
So it's a
IV. Yeah.
one-time thing, right? But I can do that every 3 months. And then I use my cream. I've developed my cream 5 years ago, and that's the only thing I use on my face. Those are the only two things I'm consistent with. Yet I don't need a facelift. And I'm telling people my goal is that I will look exactly the same when I'm 75. So
Mhm.
I'm doing an experiment for everybody. Would it be better if I started earlier? Probably would be even better. I started when I was 45.
You look pretty good.
But when I was 43, because I have pictures comparing the two. When I was 43, even though I didn't think I was aging, now when I look back at the photos, I'm actually embarrassed. I said, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was aging. I thought I looked fine. I was blaming my camera for all the photos I didn't like. I thought it was the lighting, and turned out it was me, because I was aging. But now I can take a photo. I don't need a filter. And the filter does nothing. It doesn't change anything. So, so I'm hoping that I will be an example. Imagine a person starting to do IV stem cells when they're 25, and because that's really when the decline is
Mhm.
starting to manifest.
Yeah.
And then they keep maintaining their body at a youthful state. I don't think they will ever need a facelift. So we are
Mm.
at that juncture that this is here. We're still at the early stage, but the trajectory of the human species is that we're just going to live in a youthful state for a very, very long time. I don't know much about, the details about death and, if we can overcome that. But what I know is that we can stay at a youthful state probably for at least 50 years longer.
Wow. And so do you think that the stem cells for the IV stem cells, will they reverse anything, or do you think they'll just freeze time, or they'll
They
slow things down?
reverse.
They
Yeah,
do
they
reverse. I'm
reverse
coming
because
down. I'm
research
buying
has
a plane ticket
shown,
tomorrow.
yeah, because research have shown when they gave young stem cells to older animals and
Right.
compared to the placebo, because they actually dissected the animals, right, which they can't do for
Hmm.
humans, and they sacrificed animals and looked at their muscles and their brain, and every parameter they were checking, the cells were functioning exactly at a younger state. So basically you just reversed cellular age. So if
Wow.
you can reverse that throughout your body, then you are literally a younger person.
Well, there's a mic drop right there, Joy Kong, Dr. Joy Kong, right there. I think we can drop the mic. So, okay, well, we're running out of time. I'm not running out of questions, but we are running out of time. So, is there anything else in this conversation that you wish we would have covered, or can we close it off now? Tell people where to find you.
Yeah, let me just, because one thing that has been
Yeah.
so persistent that is mind-boggling to me is that people are still telling me that I didn't think stem cells were legal in the US. And I was like,
Yes.
how did this myth persist when I've
Mhm.
trained hundreds and hundreds of doctors? The number of stem cell clinics have quadrupled in the last 5 years. And it is nowhere in the law says stem cells is illegal. It just people are scared because it's not FDA approved for the most part.
Mm.
But so many
Mhm.
therapies that doctors provide are not FDA approved. It's called the standard of care. So when doctors can find evidence in literature and when it starts to be accepted by the medical community, that's when the standard is established. And I can assure you there's more research on stem cells than any of the medication that have been approved by the FDA. So the research statistics has been tremendous, and the evidence that these therapies work and that they're extraordinarily safe has been really very inspiring. So
Yeah.
the fact that people think that somehow there's a legality to this and it's just is very misguided, and I think part of the myth is perpetuated by clinics who are overseas and they really want to grab patients. They
Mm.
want people to think that is not available in the US.
Right.
And because of their catering to certain celebrities, so somehow this myth is perpetuated because the celebrities have a big platform and they're able to tell everybody. So people are getting their medical information from celebrities. And despite my painstaking, attempt to educate, so yeah, so that's that. It's just completely not true. And but I have a lot of videos about what stem cell therapies are as far as different aspects and how you're looking at the treatment and the legalities and concerns. So I have a lot of the videos on my YouTube channels. Anybody can just go find Joy Kong MD and then just go through it if you're interested in stem cells, because it's here to stay. I'm telling you, this is revolution, because there's nowhere in human history have we ever grabbed intelligence from ourselves, really,
Yeah.
from our early source, right?
Well,
Mother,
that's the
father,
magic.
yeah, the
Yeah.
moment they conceive, there's a spark of light, there's a reset process, all the cells and DNA, everything was reverted to a younger, more vibrant state. And we're starting this new human from there. And we can borrow that fresh, new, untainted intelligence to help our body heal. So it's because it works. That's why it's been spreading like wildfire. That's why they're quadrupled the number of stem cell clinics, even though you can't put out ads on Facebook, Instagram, or Google, but still, it's not stopping it. People are
Mhm.
looking for it because people are sick and tired of not having a solution for their problems. So yeah, it's here. And I
I love
believe
it.
we can provide better results for patients actually at a lower pricing in the US. So this is something that people are not aware of.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. Okay, Dr. Kong. So, Dr. Joy Kong, MD on YouTube. And where else can people find you? Your website,
Yeah, my
your,
website just joykongmd.com,
yeah.
and my Instagram Dr_Joy_Kong. So I'm very, I pay attention. I try to respond to patients. So if they want to reach out to me, they want to ask questions, I'm very responsive. So yeah, I'm not, fortunately, people are not very nasty on my social media. Most of the comments are very pleasant. So
Yeah.
I definitely respond. But if somebody's abusive, I'm not polite. I'm polite, but I would not tolerate
As I
it.
say, you bless them and release them.
That's exactly, yes.
Dr. Joy, thank you so much for taking the time. As always, this has been such a pleasure. Folks, you got to check her out. And you got to take a look at this woman. If you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes, you got to come over to YouTube and see for yourself, because Dr. Kong has definitely frozen herself in time in the best possible way. And I don't mean that in a Botox way. Thank
I can
you.
wrinkle my forehead.
And there you go. You can still have expressions.